They had lived together for several years, but she only now saw her husband's true face. When she refused to sign a loan for the renovation of his mother's apartment, he flew into a rage. In a fit of anger, he grabbed her hand and twisted her finger sharply. The pain was unbearable, but even worse was realizing that someone so close could be capable of such cruelty over money. The next day was bound to change a great deal in their relationship. Good day, dear listeners. I'm happy to welcome you to my channel. I present to you a new, intriguing story. Enjoy listening. The door of the beauty salon Aphrodite chimed, and Beatrice looked up from her work table, cluttered with colorful bottles of nail polish. So, Gabriella, are we doing a standard manicure today or something special? Beatrice smiled at her regular client, a plump woman with red hair. Oh, darling, do something festive for me. It's our anniversary, 30 years together. Can you imagine? Gabriella plopped into the chair, sighing with fatigue. 30 years, Beatrice shook her head in admiration. Congratulations! That's an eternity. At 28, Beatrice couldn't even imagine such a span. 5 years of marriage to Valeriano already felt like quite an achievement, especially considering Mircadella, the mother-in-law who seemed to have been born with a single mission, to make her daughter-in-law's life harder. And how's your Valeriano? Gabriella held her hands under the warm water. Beatrice poured into a special bowl. Still as attentive? Beatrice smiled. Valeriano Mendoza was her safe harbor. Of average height, with kind brown eyes and perpetually tousled fair hair. He worked as an engineer at a construction company, always came home with flowers on Fridays and never raised his voice at her. Yes, he still spoils me, Beatrice replied, carefully tending to the client's cuticles. Yesterday, he came back from work with a bag of my favorite pastries. He said he was just passing the bakery and couldn't resist. Lucky you, the woman sighed. By our 10th year of marriage, my Ernesto had already forgotten what chocolates I like. After work, Beatrice stayed late to tally the monthly budget. Valeriano had promised to pick her up, and she used the time to review the family finances. Opening the spreadsheet on her phone, she frowned. Car payment, $800, mortgage, $600, utilities, groceries, Valeriano's transit pass. She sighed. Of her modest $950 salary and her husband's more substantial $1,700, almost nothing was left. A phone call interrupted her calculations. Beatrice, I'm outside. Valeriano's voice sounded a bit tense. I'm coming. She quickly closed the spreadsheet and grabbed her coat. Their 5-year-old asphalt gray sedan was parked at the salon entrance. A modest but reliable car they were still paying off. Valeriano opened the door for her and kissed her gently on the cheek. How was your day? Beatrice asked, noticing the shadows under her husband's eyes. Fine, it's just... He hesitated. Mom called. Beatrice tensed inside. Mercadella never called for nothing. Each call was a small mission to siphon resources from her son and his family. And what did she want? Beatrice asked as neutrally as possible. She asked us to stop by. Says her faucet is leaking. They turned onto Rosa Street, where the mother-in-law lived in a 5-story building. Mercadella met them in a robe and curlers, even though it was already 8 in the evening. At last, she exclaimed theatrically. I was beginning to think I'd drown here. Valeriano headed straight to the kitchen, while Beatrice stayed in the hall, taking in the surroundings. The apartment hadn't changed in years. The same yellowed wallpaper with faded roses, the same creaking parquet, and the heavy furniture that looked like it could survive a nuclear war. Beatrice, will you have some tea? Mercadella asked with exaggerated solicitude, though both women knew it was just a formality. No thank you, Mercadella. We still need to get to the store before it closes. Always the store, the store, the mother-in-law pursed her lips. But you never come see me. Good thing at least my son is attentive. Beatrice kept silent. In 5 years, she had learned not to react to such remarks. Valeriano came out of the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel. All set, Mom. Just needed to tighten the washer. Nothing complicated. Oh, son, what would I do without you? Mercadella pressed her hands to her chest. You know, I've been thinking. My apartment is all shabby. It could use a renovation. Beatrice tensed. Here it is. The real reason we were called. Renovations are necessary. Valeriano replied cautiously. But my pension won't cover that, Mercadella went on, casting a quick glance at Beatrice. If only you could help financially. Mom, you know we have two loans, Valeriano began, but she didn't let him finish. So what? Beatrice can take out the loan in her name. Her credit history is clean, and she has official employment. Beatrice felt her fingers go cold. She looked at her husband, expecting him to shut the conversation down immediately, as he always did. Mom, let's talk about this later, okay? He said gently, and Beatrice exhaled with relief. They drove home in silence. Their two-room apartment in a new development on the edge of the city had been bought 3 years ago and had become their modest yet cozy home, with store-bought furniture and photos from their trips on the walls. Do you think she's serious about the renovation? Beatrice asked while heating up dinner. I don't know, Valeriano shrugged. Mom often says she'd like to update the apartment. But honestly, everything there is really old. Remember when the upstairs neighbors flooded her last year? The ceiling still hasn't been fully repaired. Beatrice recalled the yellow stains on the living room ceiling at her mother-in-law's inside. I understand the renovation is needed, but a loan, Valeriano, we're barely making ends meet. Look, she opened the spreadsheet on her phone. After all the mandatory payments, we're left with only $400 for everything else. Food, clothes, medicine. Another loan would crush us. Valeriano put his arm around her shoulders. Don't worry, I get it. We'll figure something out. That evening, they watched a comedy series, and Beatrice almost forgot about the conversation at her mother-in-law's. Almost. The next morning, while Beatrice was making breakfast, the phone rang. Mercadella. Hello, Valeriano. You haven't forgotten our conversation, have you? I've already found out how much the renovation will cost. $8,000 at minimum. But we could take a $13,000 loan so there's enough for furniture, too. Beatrice froze with the spatula in her hand. The eggs sizzled in the pan, while her mother-in-law's insistent voice droned in the receiver. Valeriano looked away, embarrassed. Mom, I'll call you back later, okay? We're just having breakfast. He hung up and looked at his wife apologetically. Valeriano, Beatrice said quietly, please tell me you're not considering that loan. Beatrice, but she's my mother. She's alone. Her pension is small, and the apartment really is in terrible shape. Ours would be in terrible shape, too, if we didn't work from dawn to dusk to pay for everything. Beatrice raised her voice, something she almost never did. Do you understand that if I take out the loan, we'll be the ones paying it back? Your mother, with her $380 pension, won't be able to cover $540 a month. Valeriano's face darkened. Yes, I understand. It's just, maybe we could help her somehow. Maybe I could take on some extra work. Beatrice took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Valeriano, you already work 6 days a week. When would you do side jobs? At night? The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. Before they went their separate ways to work, Valeriano hugged Beatrice and whispered, I'll talk to Mom. I'll explain that right now we just can't take on another loan. Beatrice nodded gratefully. This was why she loved her husband. He always knew how to put their family first, even when it came to his mother. The salon was unusually quiet for a Tuesday. Beatrice was sorting through her tools when her phone buzzed in the pocket of her apron. A message from Valeriano. Mom is coming over this evening. She wants to discuss the renovation. I'll explain our situation to her. Beatrice felt her heart tighten with anxiety, but Valeriano was on her side. He had always been on her side. That evening, Mercadella appeared at their door with a large folder. Here, I've already ordered the design project. She ceremoniously spread some drawings out on the table. Look at this, it's going to be beautiful. Valeriano glanced uncertainly at his wife, then at his mother. Mom, we wanted to talk to you. The thing is, right now we don't have the possibility of taking on another loan. Mercadella froze, her teacup halfway to her mouth. What do you mean, no possibility? You both have good salaries, and my ceiling is about to collapse any minute. Mercadella, Beatrice began gently. Valeriano and I made a table of our expenses. After paying off our current loans, we have very little left. Another loan simply won't fit into our budget. Nonsense, the mother-in-law waved her off. Valeriano, are you really going to let your mother live in such conditions? I gave my whole life for you, Mom, Valeriano interrupted firmly. I understand your worries. But Beatrice is right. We truly cannot take on another loan right now. Maybe we could help you a little bit every month and gradually do the renovation? Mercadella pursed her lips and cast Beatrice a scornful look. I see who wears the pants in this house. I didn't expect this from you, son. I thought you respected your mother. Mom, what does respect have to do with it? Valeriano looked upset. It's just math. We don't have that kind of money. Of course you don't, the mother-in-law said venomously. When all the money goes on your trendy blouses and trinkets? Beatrice felt her face flush with heat. Mercadella, I work just as hard as Valeriano, and we pay the loans together. We have no unnecessary expenses. Oh, really? And what about that trip to the seaside last year? 5 days on the coast? Money thrown away. We saved for that trip for a whole year, Valeriano said quietly, and it was my birthday gift to Beatrice. The evening ended with Mercadella demonstratively gathering her drawings and leaving, slamming the door. Valeriano looked dejected. I'm sorry, he said, hugging Beatrice. You know how she gets. She'll cool off by tomorrow. But Beatrice wasn't so sure. Something told her this was only the beginning. The following week passed relatively calmly. Mercadella didn't call, and Beatrice almost believed that the conversation about the renovation had been forgotten. But on Saturday morning, while she and Valeriano were having breakfast, the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood Mercadella and a man with a briefcase. This is Rodrigo, the mother-in-law introduced him, a bank manager. He's here to help us arrange the loan. Beatrice nearly dropped her coffee cup. Valeriano froze at the kitchen table with a look of total bewilderment on his face. Good morning, the man in the dark suit said politely, extending his hand. Rodrigo Navarro, personal manager at Credit Finance. Mercadella told me you were interested in our home comfort program. Mom, what is going on? Valeriano nervously shifted his gaze from his mother to the bank manager. We already discussed this last week. Mercadella strode into the apartment, ignoring her son's confusion, and marched grandly into the living room. Valerianito, I decided not to waste any more time. You know, at my age, every day is precious. What if I don't live to see the day you finally decide to help me with the renovation? Rodrigo, clearly uncomfortable, coughed. If this is a bad time, I can come back later or... No, Mercadella cut him off. You came just at the right time. Come in, make yourself comfortable. Valeriano, why are you standing there like a statue? Offer the man some coffee. Beatrice set down her cup and straightened up, feeling indignation boiling inside her. She cast a quick look at her husband, silently urging him to intervene. Valeriano grimaced and finally spoke. Rodrigo, I'm sorry, but there's been a misunderstanding. We're not planning to take out a loan. My mother probably acted on her own initiative. The manager hesitated, glancing from Valeriano to Mercadella. Are you sure? I prepared a very advantageous offer based on your wife's credit history. The interest rate is only 14.99% annually, with no hidden fees. Thank you, but no, Beatrice said firmly, her heart pounding. We really cannot take another loan. We already have a mortgage and a car loan. Mercadella let out a dramatic sigh and sank onto the sofa, pressing her hand to her heart. That's how it always is. You raise a son, give him your whole life, and when you need help, he turns his back on you. And all because of whom? She shot a murderous look at Beatrice. Mom, please! Valeriano looked at her pleadingly. Don't start. I already explained our situation to you. Rodrigo, clearly regretting his visit, began carefully packing his documents back into his case. I think I'll be going. If you change your mind, here's my card. When the door closed behind the manager, a heavy silence settled over the apartment. Beatrice stood with her arms crossed, watching as Mercadella staged yet another performance. Mom, how could you bring a bank manager here without our consent? Valeriano looked genuinely upset. We told you clearly that we can't take another loan. And am I supposed to live in ruins? The mother-in-law straightened suddenly, instantly forgetting her fainting spell. The bathroom ceiling is about to collapse. The tiles are falling off. The pipes are rusted through. And you don't care that your mother could be buried under her own apartment at any moment. Beatrice couldn't stay silent anymore. Mercadella, yes, your apartment does need renovation. No one denies that. But why should we take on a loan we cannot repay? That's financial suicide. Oh, so you're the one turning my son against his own mother. The mother-in-law instantly switched her attention to Beatrice. I knew it from the beginning. You only care about money. Mom! Valeriano raised his voice, something he rarely did. Stop accusing Beatrice. The decision not to take the loan is ours. We simply cannot afford it right now. Mercadella pursed her lips and rose from the sofa. Fine. I understand. My son doesn't care about his old mother. Well then, I'll go live out my days in ruins, and if anything happens, don't blame yourselves. She headed theatrically toward the door, but turned back before leaving. By the way, Valeriano, come see me tonight. There's something we need to discuss. Alone. She cast a meaningful glance at Beatrice. When the door closed behind his mother, Beatrice sank wearily into a chair. I can't believe she hauled a bank manager over here on a Saturday morning without warning. Valeriano came over and put his arm around his wife's shoulders. I'm sorry. You know how she is. Persistent. Persistent? That's putting it mildly, Beatrice sighed. What does she want to discuss with you in private? No idea. Valeriano rubbed the bridge of his nose. Maybe I shouldn't go. No, go. Beatrice shook her head. Otherwise she won't calm down. Just please don't agree to anything rash. That evening, after Valeriano left for his mother's place, Beatrice decided to review their household budget once more. She opened the spreadsheet on the computer and started double-checking the numbers. The mortgage ate up the lion's share of their income, and the car loan was a major expense as well. After utilities, transport, and food, very little remained. Beatrice tried to estimate what they'd pay if they took another $13,000 loan. At 14.9% interest, the monthly payment would be about $320. That would mean giving up any unplanned expenses, no trips, no new clothes, no gifts for each other. And that's assuming no one got sick or lost their job. The phone rang, interrupting her calculations. A co-worker's name lit up on the screen. Hi, Beatrice. Listen, here's the thing. Carmela's voice sounded agitated. The salon owner decided to cut staff. She says there are fewer clients. She's keeping only 3 technicians out of 6. Beatrice felt a chill run down her back. Am I being let go? Not sure yet. She'll decide next week. I just wanted to warn you so you're prepared. You know, just in case. After the call, Beatrice sat for a long time staring into space. If she got laid off, their finances would become catastrophic. Even with her salary, they barely made ends meet. And if they also added a loan to renovate her mother-in-law's apartment? Valeriano returned late, with a strange look on his face. How did it go? Beatrice asked cautiously. I don't know. He sank heavily into a chair. Mom showed me photos of the apartment. It's really bad, Beatrice. There's black mold on the bathroom walls, the kitchen linoleum is full of holes, and the living room ceiling looks awful after the flooding. Beatrice sat down beside him. I understand, but Valeriano, Carmela just called. There are layoffs planned at the salon, and I might be out of a job in the coming weeks. Valeriano turned pale. What? Why didn't you tell me right away? You just walked in. Beatrice took his hand. Listen, if I'm laid off, it'll be very hard for us even with our current loans. And if we add another... I know. Valeriano rubbed his face with his hands. But Mom... She was crying, Beatrice. She said she feels abandoned, that she's scared to live in an apartment that's falling apart. And what did you tell her? That we'd think about it, that maybe I'd take on extra work. Beatrice drew a deep breath. Valeriano, you already work 6 days a week. When would you do side jobs? And what if you get fired from exhaustion? I don't know. He looked completely spent. Maybe we could at least help with the bare minimum? Start by fixing the bathroom. That takes money we don't have, too, Beatrice reminded him gently. And besides, you know your mother. She won't agree to a partial renovation. She wants everything, and she wants it now. The next day, Mercadella called again. This time she chose a different tactic. Beatrice, sweetheart, her voice dripped with honey. I understand you and Valeriano are worried about money, but I was thinking, what if I transfer the apartment to you? After the renovation, it'll be worth much more. Consider it an investment. Beatrice nearly choked on her tea. Mercadella, are you saying you want to sell us your apartment? No, no, of course not, the mother-in-law laughed. Just re-register it in Valeriano's name. After I die, it'll be his anyway, and this way you'll be sure the renovation money won't be wasted. I, I need to discuss this with Valeriano, Beatrice replied, flustered. He's at work right now. Of course, discuss it. I'm sure Valeriano will agree. He's always been a sensible boy. After the call, Beatrice rang her husband immediately. Valeriano, your mother just offered to transfer the apartment to us if we do the renovation. Seriously? Surprise colored Valeriano's voice. She's never talked about re-registering it before. I don't know how serious the offer is, Beatrice said cautiously. But even if it is, we still can't afford another loan, especially if I lose my job. Let's talk about it tonight, okay? Valeriano sighed. I'm in a meeting right now. That evening, they discussed Mercadella's proposal at length. Valeriano seemed encouraged by the idea. See, if the apartment is in our name, it really makes sense. After the renovation, it'll be worth much more. We could sell it later and pay off the loans. And where would your mother live? Beatrice asked. You're not planning to kick her out, are you? Of course not, Valeriano protested. She'll live there as before. I'm talking about the distant future. Beatrice thought it over. Valeriano, are you sure your mother will actually transfer the apartment? That this isn't just a way to convince us to take the loan? Beatrice, she's my mother. She wouldn't lie. All right, Beatrice tried another angle. Let's assume she keeps her word. We still can't take a loan now. I could lose my job at any moment. How would we pay 3 loans on your salary alone? Maybe your parents could help? Valeriano suggested uncertainly. Beatrice pressed her lips together. My parents are barely scraping by. Dad's retired. Mom cleans part-time. You know that. The conversation hit a dead end, and they decided to revisit it later. But Mercadella had no intention of giving them a break. The next day she showed up at their place unannounced, with a bag of pastries and a beaming smile. My children! She kissed Valeriano on both cheeks, and even Beatrice got an air kiss. I brought you fresh cheese pastries. And news! She ceremoniously laid a folder of documents on the table. Here, I've already prepared the deed of gift for the apartment. Just needs to be signed and notarized. Beatrice and Valeriano exchanged glances. Mom, this is unexpected, Valeriano began cautiously. But we still haven't decided about the loan. What do you mean, haven't decided? Mercadella frowned. Valeriano, we discussed everything the day before yesterday. I give you the apartment. You do the renovation. Fair and square. It's not about fairness, Mom. Valeriano shook his head. It's that we can't take a loan right now. There are layoffs at Beatrice's work. Ah, so that's it. The mother-in-law threw up her hands. Then let Beatrice take the loan now, while she's still employed. Otherwise, it'll be too late. Beatrice couldn't take it anymore. Mercadella, are you hearing us? If I lose my job, we won't be able to pay the loan. We could be declared bankrupt and lose everything. Don't be dramatic, she waved it off. Valeriano will find a second job, or you'll find a new one, better than the last. There's always a way. Mom, Valeriano said firmly, we can't take that kind of risk. Let's at least wait a month and see what happens with Beatrice's job. Mercadella pressed her lips together and began ostentatiously gathering the documents. I can see I've wasted my efforts. I thought my son appreciated my care. Apparently not. She headed for the door but turned back. By the way, I've already arranged a construction crew. They're ready to start in a week. I've already paid a deposit out of my pension. When the door closed behind her, Beatrice sank into a chair, exhausted. She's not going to stop, is she? Valeriano looked worn out. I don't know, but this is already crossing every line. The next morning, Mercadella called early. Valeriano, you need to come immediately. A pipe burst. My whole apartment is flooded. Valeriano threw on his clothes and rushed to his mother's. He came back 2 hours later, dark as a storm cloud. There's no flood, he said, tossing his jacket on the sofa. Just a leaking bathroom faucet, as usual. Then why do you look so grim? Beatrice asked. Because she showed me the builder's estimate. Valeriano pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. They really are ready to start in a week. And she really did pay a deposit. $500. Where did she get that kind of money? Beatrice was surprised. She said her pension barely covers food. No idea, Valeriano shook his head. Maybe she'd been saving, but the fact is, she's already set the process in motion, and if we don't find the money, she'll lose the deposit. Beatrice felt a wave of irritation wash over her. Valeriano, she did this on purpose. Paid the money to corner us. I know, he sank into a chair exhausted. But what do we do now? The same as before. Stand our ground, Beatrice said firmly. We cannot take a loan. Period. But the pressure from Mercadella only intensified. She began calling every day, sometimes several times a day. One moment a bathroom tile had supposedly fallen off, then the wiring was sparking, then the floor was sagging. Every call ended the same way. If you had agreed to the renovation, this wouldn't be happening. Valeriano grew more and more nervous and irritable. Beatrice noticed how he flinched every time the phone rang. On Friday evening, just as they were about to watch a movie and unwind after a hard week, the phone rang yet again. Valeriano! Mercadella's voice was so loud that Beatrice could hear it while sitting next to her husband. I have an emergency. Come immediately. What happened? Valeriano asked wearily. A section of the bathroom ceiling collapsed, right into the tub. Good thing I wasn't bathing at the time. Valeriano jumped up. I'm on my way. I'll be there in half an hour. Beatrice decided to go with him. When they reached his mother's apartment, she met them in a bathrobe with a towel on her head. Finally, I thought you weren't coming. Where did the ceiling collapse? Valeriano asked as he stepped inside. In the bathroom, I'm telling you. Mercadella led them to the bathroom. Beatrice immediately noticed the tub was empty. No traces of plaster or debris. The ceiling looked the same as always, with yellow stains from old leaks, but no new damage. Mom, Valeriano said slowly, examining the ceiling, where's the collapse? I already cleaned everything up, Mercadella answered quickly. I couldn't leave such a mess. But believe me, the piece was huge. From right here, she pointed to a corner of the ceiling, where there was indeed a small crack. It fell straight into the tub. Beatrice saw Valeriano clench his fists. She rarely saw him truly angry, but now he was clearly struggling to contain his irritation. Mom, nothing collapsed here. The ceiling looks exactly the same as last time. Are you calling me a liar? Mercadella pressed a hand to her chest theatrically. Your own mother. I'm not calling you a liar. Valeriano took a deep breath. I just don't see any evidence of a collapse. Of course, the mother-in-law said sarcastically. If you didn't see it, then it didn't happen. And the fact I could have died under the rubble is nothing, I suppose. Beatrice felt her patience snap. Mercadella, please, that's enough. We understand you need a renovation, but you can't get your way by these methods. By what methods? The mother-in-law instantly turned on Beatrice. You're the one turning my son against me. You're the one who doesn't want to help an old woman. Mom, stop! Valeriano raised his voice. Beatrice has nothing to do with it. It's our joint decision not to take a loan we can't repay. What's there to repay? Mercadella exclaimed. $13,000 is peanuts these days. For us, it's not peanuts, Valeriano said firmly. We can barely handle our current payments. That's because you're stuck in that miserable position, the mother-in-law attacked. At your age, your father was already a department head, and you're still languishing as an engineer. Beatrice saw Valeriano's face grow more and more tense. It was a low blow. He was always sensitive about comparisons to his father. We're leaving, he said curtly. Call when you're ready to talk normally. All the way home, Valeriano was silent, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Beatrice didn't dare break the silence. Only when they entered their apartment did he finally say, You know, maybe she's right. Maybe we should agree to this renovation. Beatrice froze. What? Valeriano, you just saw how she manipulates. There was no collapse. I know. He sank onto the couch, exhausted. But she won't stop, Beatrice. She'll call every day, invent new disasters, keep pressing and pressing until we give in. And you're suggesting we just give up? Beatrice couldn't believe her ears. Take out a loan we can't repay just to make her leave us alone? What else can we do? Desperation crept into Valeriano's voice. She's my mother. I can't just turn my back on her. Beatrice sat beside him and took his hand. Valeriano, listen. I know this is hard, but if we take that loan, we're risking everything we have. Our apartment, our future. Are you really willing to take that risk? Valeriano was silent for a long time, then said quietly, No, of course not. But I don't know how to stop this nightmare. We have to stand firm. Beatrice squeezed his hand. Together we can handle it. Let's give her one more chance. Valeriano looked worn out by the endless conflicts. Maybe she truly realized she went too far? Maybe, Beatrice agreed uncertainly, though her intuition told her otherwise. All day she couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. There were few clients at the salon, and the manager again hinted at possible layoffs, which only heightened her anxiety. That evening, she and Valeriano arrived at Mircadella's exactly at 6. The mother-in-law greeted them in a neatly pressed dress, with styled hair and a radiant smile. Come in, my dears. She kissed Valeriano on both cheeks, and even Beatrice got a hug. I'm so glad you came. The apartment was filled with the scent of freshly baked apple pie. On the table stood pretty cups that Mircadella brought out only for special occasions, and a little vase of expensive chocolates. Sit, sit, the mother-in-law fussed. I'll bring the tea. Valerianito, there's a photo album on the shelf. Please get it. I've been going through old photos and found so many interesting ones. Beatrice watched this idyllic scene warily. Something was definitely off. Mercadella had never been such a gracious hostess, especially toward her. Over tea, the mother-in-law showed old photos, recalled stories from Valeriano's childhood, laughed and joked. Not a word about the renovation, not a hint about the loan. Look, here's Valeriano at 3, she offered a worn snapshot. He was such a serious boy, always trying to help his mama. A beautiful child, Beatrice said politely, taking the photo. Yes, the spitting image of his father, Mircadella sighed. You know, Valeriano, I often think how proud your dad would be of you. You've grown up so caring, so responsible. Valeriano smiled, embarrassed. Thank you, Mom. No, I mean it. Mercadella covered her hand with his. You always think of others, your family, and me. She paused, then added with a light sigh, I understand I can be a bit too persistent sometimes. But you know I only want what's best for you. Beatrice noticed the tension leaving Valeriano's shoulders. He relaxed, believing in his mother's sincerity. By the way, Mercadella said casually as she poured the tea, I spoke with my neighbor Isabella. She works at a bank. She said there's a special program for pensioners. You can get a loan secured by the apartment, and the interest is really low. Here we go, Beatrice thought. It's starting. Mom, we agreed not to discuss renovations or loans today, Valeriano reminded her. Oh, I'm not talking about that, Mercadella fluttered her hands. It just came up. I'm not pressuring you, my children. I've already resigned myself to living as things are. She sighed theatrically, then quickly changed the subject. You know what? Let me show you what the living room sofa looked like when Valeriano was little. I should have a photo somewhere. She stood and headed to the bedroom for the album. As soon as she was out of sight, Beatrice whispered to Valeriano. She hasn't given up. She's just changed tactics. Give her a chance, he whispered back. So far, so good. The evening continued in the same vein. Mercadella was the picture of hospitality, dropping in the occasional offhand mention of her shabby apartment and the hard life of a pensioner. By 9 o'clock, Valeriano had completely relaxed, convinced by his mother's miraculous transformation. Beatrice, however, remained on guard. When it was time to leave, Mercadella began packing up the leftover pie for them. Take it, children, for tea. Valerianito, you love apple, don't you? Thanks, Mom. Valeriano hugged her. It was so nice to spend time together as a family. Yes, a wonderful evening, Mercadella agreed, then suddenly gasped and grabbed her back. Oh, something pinched. I must have strained it when I pulled the albums down from the top shelf. Do you need help? Valeriano asked, alarmed. Should we call a doctor? No, don't be silly, she smiled weakly. It's just old age. You know, it's hard to do everything by myself sometimes. If there were a renovation, we could put the shelves lower so I wouldn't have to stretch. Beatrice barely kept herself from rolling her eyes. The manipulation was obvious. Mom, I'll come tomorrow and help you move the shelves, Valeriano offered. Really? Mercadella beamed. You're such a caring son. You know, maybe, she paused, maybe you could help me with one more little thing? With what? Valeriano asked, wary. The bank manager is coming tomorrow, Mercadella rushed on, just to advise me about the loan. Could you listen in too? You have a finance background. You understand these things better. Beatrice felt irritation rising inside. The whole show, pie, photos, hugs, was just a way to steer the conversation back to the same old loan. Mercadella, she couldn't hold back. We've already discussed this. We can't take a loan right now, and Valeriano can't act as guarantor. I'm not asking for a guarantor, the mother-in-law shot back at once. Just advice. Can't he even give his own mother advice? Valeriano looked unsettled. Okay, Mom, I'll come tomorrow, but only to advise you, nothing more. When they stepped out of the building, Beatrice couldn't contain her outrage. Valeriano, can't you see she's simply using another tactic? First pressure, now playing the sympathy card. I know, he sighed, but what am I supposed to do? She's my mother. I can't just brush her off. No one's asking you to brush her off, but you need to be able to say no. Beatrice took his hand. Tomorrow she'll pressure you again with that manager, and you'll be caught in the middle all over. I can handle it, Valeriano squeezed her palm. I promise. But Beatrice wasn't so sure. She knew all too well how skillfully Mercadella could pressure her son. The next day, Valeriano went to his mother's alone. Beatrice stayed home, anxiously waiting for his return. When he finally appeared, his expression said it all. What happened? Beatrice asked, helping him off with his coat. The manager didn't show up. Valeriano sank wearily into a chair. But there was a contractor, the very one Mom paid the deposit to. He said that if the main payment isn't made within a week, they'll terminate the contract and the deposit will be forfeited. And what did you say? That we'd think about it. Valeriano rubbed his face with his hands. Mom was crying, Beatrice. She said she'd saved those $500 for months, depriving herself of everything. Beatrice sat down beside him. Valeriano, you do realize this is manipulation, right? She created this situation herself to corner us. I do, he replied quietly, but that doesn't make it any easier. On Monday, the salon director called Beatrice into her office. The conversation was brief. Due to declining profits, they were downsizing, and Beatrice was among those being let go. I'm very sorry, Beatrice. The director looked genuinely upset. You're an excellent technician, but we simply have no choice. Beatrice came home earlier than usual, barely holding back tears. Their financial situation was now critical. Without her salary, they would barely be able to pay their existing loans, let alone take on new ones. She decided not to call Valeriano at work with bad news. He already had enough stress because of his mother. Instead, she opened her laptop and started looking for job openings. Maybe she'd get lucky and find something quickly. In the evening, when Valeriano came home from work, she told him about the layoff. What are we going to do now? He looked completely lost. How will we pay the loans? I'm already looking for a new job. Beatrice tried to sound confident. I'll find something. The main thing now is not to panic and, she paused, not to take on any new obligations. Valeriano understood what she meant. You mean my mother's apartment? Yes, that's off the table entirely now. The next day, Mercadella called Valeriano at work. Beatrice only found out when he came home, pale with a frozen expression. What happened? She asked anxiously. Mom found out you were laid off, Valeriano said, dropping onto the sofa without taking off his coat. I don't know how, but she did. And now she says it's a sign of fate. A sign of fate? Beatrice repeated, puzzled. Yes, Valeriano gave a bleak smile. According to her, since you're out of work anyway, it's the perfect time to take out a loan and start renovating her apartment. It'll give you something to do, and she'll get a refreshed home. Has she lost her mind? Beatrice burst out. How can I take out a loan if I have no income? She said the bank has a special program. Valeriano looked exhausted. That it can be taken out in my name, and you would just supervise the renovation since you're at home anyway. Beatrice couldn't believe her ears. Valeriano, tell me you're not considering that. Of course not. He threw up his hands. How could you think that? I told her it's impossible, that now we have to save every cent. And what did she say? That I'm an ungrateful son, Valeriano said with a bitter smile. that she gave me her whole life and I can't help her in her old age. That my father would be turning in his grave if he knew how I treat her. Beatrice moved closer and put an arm around his shoulders. I'm so sorry, Valeriano. It's unfair the way she pressures you. You know what's worst? He looked at her, pain in his eyes. Sometimes I start to believe her. I start to think I really am a bad son. You're a wonderful son, Beatrice said firmly. You always help her. You're always there when she needs you. But there's a difference between helping and self-destruction. Taking a loan we can't repay is financial suicide. Valeriano nodded, but his eyes remained dull. In the days that followed, Mircadella called him several times a day. One time she needed a light bulb screwed in, then a wardrobe moved, then to check why the fridge was making a strange noise. Every time Valeriano came over, the conversation somehow shifted to the renovation and the loan. Beatrice watched her husband grow more and more tense and irritable. He slept badly, flinched at the sound of the phone, and became distracted at work. Maybe we should turn off our phones for the weekend? Beatrice suggested on Friday evening. Give ourselves a day of silence, a break from all this. What if something happens to Mom? Valeriano shook his head. No, I can't. On Saturday morning, they were awakened by a persistent ring at the door. On the threshold stood Mircadella with a huge bag. Mom? What's going on? Valeriano, barely awake, let her in. What's going on is that I can't live in that nightmare any longer, Mircadella declared, marching into the living room and dropping the bag on the floor. The bathroom is leaking again. The whole ceiling is covered in stains. I'm afraid mold will start, and I have asthma. I've decided to stay with you until the renovation issue is resolved. Beatrice and Valeriano exchanged stunned looks. Mom, we can't, Valeriano began, but Mircadella cut him off. What do you mean, can't? I gave my whole life for you, and you won't even take me in? She turned to Beatrice. You're the one turning him against me. I always knew you wanted to destroy our family. Mircadella, Beatrice tried to keep her voice calm. No one is turning Valeriano against you. We simply can't take out a loan for the renovation. I lost my job. We barely have enough to cover the loans we already have. I see how it is. The mother-in-law pressed her lips together. No room for an elderly mother, but there's money for a life of luxury. What life of luxury, Mom? Valeriano couldn't hold back. We're barely scraping by. And that flat screen on the wall? The new sofa? Mircadella swept her arm around the living room. There's money for that, but not for renovating your mother's apartment. The TV was a wedding gift from Beatrice's parents, and we bought the sofa on installments before we even took out the mortgage, Valeriano explained wearily. Mom, please, let's not go over this again. Great solution. Let's just close our eyes to your mother's problems. Mircadella plopped dramatically into an armchair. I'm not going anywhere until we settle the renovation. The next 3 days turned into a nightmare. Mircadella took over their living room, constantly complaining about everything, from the hard sofa to the noisy neighbors, criticizing Beatrice for every little thing, and never missing a chance to remind Valeriano of his filial duty. Beatrice felt the tension between her and her husband growing. They barely spoke, afraid of another conflict. Valeriano became more and more nervous and irritable. On the 4th day, a neighbor called Mircadella. Supposedly, a pipe had burst in her apartment and water was flooding the downstairs neighbors. The mother-in-law had to rush back home. When the door closed behind her, Beatrice let out a sigh of relief. Finally! Don't celebrate too soon, Valeriano replied darkly. She won't give up that easily. And he was right. That evening, Mircadella called to say the pipe had been fixed, but part of the bathroom ceiling had collapsed, and the apartment needed urgent renovation more than ever. Valeriano, I don't know what to do. Her voice trembled. I can't live there. It's simply dangerous, and the builders won't start without payment. They've already called, saying that if the money doesn't arrive by Monday, they'll terminate the contract and take another job. Valeriano closed his eyes, gripping the phone. Mom, I don't know what else to say. We can't take out a loan. Beatrice lost her job. We don't have that kind of money. Then the choice is obvious. Mircadella's voice suddenly turned hard. Either you help your mother, or you choose that woman who can't even keep a job. Valeriano flinched. Don't you dare talk about Beatrice like that. She's my wife. And I'm your mother, Mercadella nearly shouted. I gave you life. I stayed up nights when you were sick. I denied myself everything so you could study at a good institute, and now you choose some? Enough, Valeriano cut her off sharply. I'm not going to listen to this. He hung up and tossed the phone onto the sofa as if it had burned his hand. I'm sorry, he said to Beatrice, who had been standing beside him the whole time. She shouldn't have spoken about you like that. It's okay, Beatrice tried to smile. I understand this is hard for her. But in truth, it hurt. It hurt to see the man she loved torn between her and his mother. It hurt to hear such unfair accusations. It hurt to realize that this conflict seemed never-ending. That night, Valeriano tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Beatrice could feel his tension, but didn't know how to help. The next day, as they were having breakfast, the doorbell rang. Beatrice opened it to find a tearful Mercadella on the threshold. I need to talk to Valeriano, she said, walking into the apartment. It's urgent. Valeriano came out of the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel. What happened, Mom? The builders have finally refused to do the renovation. The mother-in-law sank into a chair, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. I lost the $500 deposit, money I saved for a whole year. I'm sorry, Valeriano said sincerely, but maybe that's for the best. You can find other builders when the financial situation improves. When will it improve? When I'm dead, Mercadella smiled bitterly. Is that what you're waiting for? Mom, how can you say that? Valeriano was shocked. I love you. You know that. If you loved me, you'd have helped with the renovation long ago, the mother-in-law snapped. As it is, she shifted her gaze to Beatrice. It's clear who matters more to you. I'm not going to choose between you, Valeriano exclaimed. You're both important to me. Then the choice is already made, Mercadella stood up. If you can't help your own mother because of this... She has a name, Mom, Valeriano said quietly. Her name is Beatrice, and she's my wife. Of course, the mother-in-law said venomously. Your precious Beatrice, who can't even find a job, but knows how to spend your money on rags and baubles. Beatrice felt her face burn at the injustice of those words. She had never been a spendthrift. She always saved and contributed to the family budget. Mercadella, she tried to keep her voice steady. I understand that you're upset, but please don't accuse me of things I haven't done. Oh, so you're talking back now? The mother-in-law turned to Valeriano. See what a snake you've warmed at your breast? She doesn't even respect your mother. Valeriano looked utterly exhausted. Mom, please stop. Beatrice has always treated you with respect, despite your constant nitpicking. Nitpicking? Mercadella gasped with indignation. You call my fair remarks nitpicking? You... She suddenly grabbed Valeriano by the hand and yanked him toward her. Let's go. We're going to the bank right now. I'll show you what this loan is, and you'll see it's perfectly manageable for you. Mom, let go! Valeriano tried to pull free, but Mercadella clamped onto him with a death grip. No! We're going to the bank. I won't let that woman control my son. With unexpected strength, Mercadella yanked Valeriano toward the door. Beatrice, seeing the scene, froze in shock. Never before had the conflict gone this far. The mother-in-law, who usually manipulated with words, had switched to physical coercion. Let me go, Mom! Valeriano tried to free his arm, but Mercadella held on like a vice. No, you're coming with me. We'll settle this once and for all. She kept dragging him toward the exit. Beatrice finally snapped out of it. Mercadella, please, calm down. You can't do this. You be quiet! The mother-in-law turned to her, face twisted with rage. This is all your fault. You've turned him against his own mother. At that moment, a real struggle broke out between Valeriano and Mercadella. He tried to break free. She wouldn't let go. At one point, she grabbed his other hand and yanked him toward her. Mom, stop! You're hurting me, Valeriano cried, but Mercadella seemed not to hear. We're going to the bank. Right now. She kept dragging him to the door with strength surprising for her age. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, Beatrice rushed to them. Mercadella, stop! You can't do this. She tried to step between them to break them apart. At that moment, Mercadella shoved her hard and grabbed Valeriano's arm again, twisting it. You're coming with me. You have to help your mother. Beatrice saw her husband's face contort with pain. Something in him changed, as if it snapped. His eyes darkened, and in the next instant he jerked his arm sharply, and Beatrice heard a distinct crack. "Ow!" she cried out, feeling a sharp pain in her ring finger, which had accidentally gotten caught between Valeriano's and his mother's hands. Silence fell instantly. Mercadella stepped back. Valeriano froze, eyes wide with horror. Beatrice looked at her hand. The ring finger was bent at an unnatural angle. "Beatrice!" Valeriano whispered, stepping toward her. "God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." But Beatrice backed away, cradling her injured hand against her chest. The pain throbbed, but the emotional pain from what had happened was even worse. It was a moment of truth. She realized the situation had gone too far. "I'm going to the ER," she said quietly, heading to the bedroom. "Don't follow me." For a moment stunned by what had happened, Mercadella quickly recovered. "So what? It's just a finger. No one dies from that. At least now you see, Valeriano, what she's willing to do just to keep you from helping your mother. She put on a whole show." Valeriano looked at his mother with an expression Beatrice had never seen on his face, a mix of shock, disappointment, and cold fury. "Leave," he said in a tone that made even Mercadella fall silent for a moment. "What?" She stared at her son in disbelief. "I said leave," Valeriano repeated, pointing to the door. "Right now." "But Valeriano—" "No, no buts. You've crossed every line, Mom. Because of you, I hurt my wife. Go." Mercadella opened her mouth to say something, but meeting her son's icy gaze, she silently headed for the exit. At the door, she turned back. "You'll regret this, Valeriano. You'll regret choosing her over your own mother." When the door closed behind her, Valeriano rushed to the bedroom where Beatrice was packing a bag, trying to manage with one hand. "Beatrice, forgive me," his voice trembled. "I didn't mean it. I never imagined it would end like this." "I know," she answered softly without looking at him. "But it happened, Valeriano, and it's not about the finger. It's that we've reached the point of physically suffering because of your mother's whims." She closed the bag and turned to him. "I'm going to the ER, and then to my parents. I need time to think." "Beatrice, please." Valeriano looked utterly lost. "Let me drive you to the ER. Don't leave like this." "No." She shook her head. "I'll call a taxi. You also need time to think things through." At the ER, they put her hand in a cast. She had a fracture of the ring finger. The doctor, an older man with tired eyes, gave her a questioning look. "Household injury?" "Yes," she answered curtly, avoiding his gaze. The doctor noted something in the chart. "You know, we have a psychologist who works with victims of domestic violence." "No, thank you," Beatrice cut him off quickly. "It really was an accident." After leaving the ER, she stood outside for a long time, looking at her bandaged hand and thinking about what to do next. Her phone buzzed in her bag with Valeriano's endless calls, but she didn't answer. Having made up her mind, Beatrice headed not to her parents, but home, just to collect what she needed. To her surprise, Valeriano wasn't there. On the kitchen table lay a note. "Beatrice, I went to see Mom to settle this once and for all. I owe you, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix it. Please wait for me. I love you. Valeriano." But Beatrice couldn't wait. She quickly gathered the essentials, took her documents, and called a taxi. Before leaving, she wrote a short note. "Valeriano, I need time. I'll be at my parents'. Please don't call or come for now. Beatrice." Her parents welcomed her with worry and care. Her mother, seeing the cast, threw up her hands. "Beatrice, what happened?" Beatrice didn't hide the truth. She told them everything. About Mercadella's demand to take out a loan, the constant pressure, and the day's scene. Her parents listened in silence, occasionally exchanging glances. "And what do you plan to do now?" her father asked carefully when she finished. "I don't know," Beatrice admitted honestly, "but it can't go on like this. I love Valeriano, but I can't live in constant tension and fear of his mother." That same evening, she called a friend who was a lawyer and learned about the divorce procedure. The next morning, she went to the bank and asked to freeze all joint accounts until the court ruled on the division of property. It was a hard step, but Beatrice understood she had to protect herself and her interests. She didn't know how Valeriano's conversation with Mercadella would end, and wanted to be ready for anything. That same day she filed for divorce. Standing at the clerk's counter in the courthouse, Beatrice felt a strange calm, as if after months of tension, something inside her had finally resolved. Valeriano called her in the evening, his voice infinitely tired. "Beatrice, I was at the bank. Our accounts are all frozen. Was that you?" She didn't deny it. "I filed for divorce, Valeriano, and asked to freeze the accounts until the court decides on the division of property. I'm sorry, but I had to protect myself." There was a long pause, and then he asked quietly, "Do you really want a divorce?" Beatrice took a deep breath. "I don't know what I want, Valeriano. I only know I can't keep living the way we have these past months. Constant stress, pressure, manipulation, and now even a physical injury. It's too much." "I talked to Mom." His voice sounded dull. "I told her I won't tolerate that behavior anymore. That if she doesn't stop pressuring us, I'll cut off contact." "And what did she say?" "She didn't take it well." Valeriano gave a bitter smile. "She said I'm betraying her, that I'm choosing you over my own mother, that I'm an ungrateful son who doesn't deserve her love." "I'm sorry," Beatrice said sincerely. "I know how important your relationship with her is." "Was," Valeriano corrected her. "Now I see she never respected my choices or my boundaries, that her love always came with conditions. And I don't want to live like that anymore." Beatrice didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to believe that Valeriano had truly changed, that he had finally seen his mother's true face, but another part remembered the months of manipulation and pressure, and finally the pain of a broken finger. "I don't know, Valeriano," she said at last. "I need time." "I understand," there was sadness in his voice, "but please don't close the door completely. Give us a chance." After the call, Beatrice couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about her future. She loved Valeriano, but could she trust him after everything that had happened? Could she be sure he would really change and put their family first? The next day, Valeriano stood at an ATM, staring helplessly at the screen showing the account was blocked. He had just received his salary and planned to pay the mortgage and the car loan, but now all the money was inaccessible. When he got home, he found an enraged Mercadella on the doorstep. "You must resolve the renovation immediately," she announced from the threshold. "I spoke with the builders. They're willing to come back if we pay the full amount up front within a week." "Mom, I don't have any money." Beatrice froze all the accounts and filed for divorce. "What?" Mercadella froze for a moment. "That ungrateful, after all we've done for her." "And what have you done for her, Mom?" Valeriano asked calmly. "You criticized her from the first day we met. You constantly demanded our money and attention. You manipulated me to pressure her, and because of you, she has a broken finger." "Don't you dare blame me!" Mercadella raised her voice. "It's all her fault. She turned you against your own mother." "No, Mom." Valeriano shook his head. "You destroyed everything yourself, with your selfishness, your endless demands, your inability to respect our boundaries." "How dare you!" Mercadella gasped with indignation. "After everything I've done for you?" "I'm grateful for everything you did for me in childhood," Valeriano replied calmly. "But I'm an adult. I have my own family, and I won't let you interfere in my life like this anymore." Mercadella opened her mouth to say something, but after meeting her son's steady gaze, she turned on her heel and left, slamming the door. Valeriano sank onto the couch, feeling a strange mix of emptiness and relief. For the first time in his life, he had set a boundary with his mother, and though it hurt, he knew he had done the right thing. The divorce proceedings went quickly and relatively smoothly. Beatrice and Valeriano agreed on the division of property without unnecessary disputes. She received half the value of the apartment and car, as well as compensation for moral damages over her broken finger. Valeriano was left with the loans and the obligation to pay Beatrice her share within a year. After the divorce, Beatrice rented a small apartment and began a new life. She found work at another beauty salon with a higher salary and gradually started to recover from everything she had been through. Valeriano occasionally called her, asked how she was, and told her about himself. He still hoped for reconciliation, but Beatrice wasn't ready. The wound was too fresh, the distrust too strong. Mercadella, deprived of her son's support, was forced to put her renovation dreams aside. She lived in the same shabby apartment, calling Valeriano from time to time with complaints about her health and household problems. But now he was firm in his decision not to give in to her manipulations. Life after the divorce was hard for Valeriano. He was left with 2 loans and the obligation to pay Beatrice her share of the property. He had to tighten his belt, give up many comforts, and work overtime. But strangely enough, he didn't feel bitterness. Rather, it felt like a fair price to pay for his failure to protect his wife from his own mother. A year passed. Beatrice gradually built her new life. Her finger had healed, though it still ached in cold weather, reminding her of the past. She made new acquaintances, began devoting more time to herself and her interests. One day, a man walked into the salon where she worked, tall, with a kind smile and attentive eyes. He booked a manicure, and during the appointment, they started talking. His name was Sergio. He was an architect and had recently moved to their city for work. "Would you like to have coffee after your shift?" he asked when Beatrice finished with his hands. She hesitated only for a moment, then smiled. "With pleasure." That coffee turned into dinner, dinner into a walk through the evening city, and the walk into the beginning of a new relationship. Sergio was attentive, caring, and most importantly, respected her boundaries and decisions. 6 months later, he proposed, and Beatrice accepted. They planned a quiet wedding with only their closest loved ones. Valeriano learned about her engagement from mutual acquaintances. He called to congratulate her. "I'm happy for you, Beatrice." His voice sounded sincere. "You deserve happiness." "Thank you, Valeriano." She was grateful for his understanding. "How are you?" "I'm fine." He paused. "I paid off the car loan. Still have the mortgage, but I'm managing." "And your mother?" Beatrice asked cautiously. "The same as always." His voice carried weariness. "Still demanding renovations. Still blaming the whole world for her problems. But I've learned to set boundaries. We see each other once a week. I help her with practical things, but I don't let her control my life anymore." "I'm glad you found balance," Beatrice said sincerely. "I've learned a lot over these 3 years." Valeriano replied. "It's just a shame it's too late." After that conversation, they didn't speak again. Beatrice married Sergio, and together they started building their family. Valeriano remained alone, paying off debts and helping his mother, who never accepted his decision to live his own life. Sometimes, when passing by the house where she had once lived with Valeriano, Beatrice thought about how one decision, refusing to take out a loan to renovate her mother-in-law's apartment, had changed her entire life. It was a painful but necessary decision that ultimately led her to true happiness. And until her last days, Mercadella reproached her son for letting such a good daughter-in-law slip away because of his weakness and foolishness. Yet even if Valeriano had told her that it was her own interference that had destroyed his marriage, she would never have believed him. In her world, she was always right, and no facts could shake that conviction. Valeriano made peace with it, learning to filter her words and keep his inner balance. That was his price, living with the awareness of his mistakes and their consequences. But it was also his lesson, a lesson about the importance of boundaries, self-respect, and the ability to say no, even to the closest people, when their demands crossed every reasonable limit. Sometimes he saw Beatrice and Sergio in town, happy, smiling, holding hands. And although there would always be a place in his heart for her, he was glad she had found happiness. After all, that's what she deserved. Someone who would put her above everything else, including the demands of his own mother. And if there was a moral to this story, it was this simple truth. Love is not just a feeling, but a choice. A choice we make every day, setting priorities and deciding what truly matters to us. And sometimes the most painful lessons turn out to be the most valuable, if we find the strength to draw the right conclusions from them.